Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Oshkosh Chamber Meet the Mayoral Candidates Forum on this cold Oshkosh day. Boy, that was stark awakening this morning. So, but I'm glad you all could join us. I'm John Casper with the Oshkosh Chamber. And with us today are candidates for the mayor of the city of Oshkosh, Deb Allison Osby, Chris Larson. Robert Wilcox will be joining us. He's off taking his kids to school, so he'll get on shortly. And then Lori Palmieri, is currently mayor, is unable to attend today. So we'll carry on and start with Deb and Chris, who are with us. This forum is a little different than what we usually do. It's not necessarily a debate. It's an opportunity to meet candidates that are running. All familiar faces, but it's an opportunity to find out a little bit more about them, why they're running for mayor, their priorities, and that sort of thing. So there is a primary next in two Tuesdays. I think it's on the 16th. So be sure you get out and vote on that day. What we're going to do is we're going to have each candidate introduce themselves, ask them why they're running for mayor, outline qualifications, outline their priorities, and then provide some closing comments. So we've provided up to 3 minutes for each candidate to answer each of those questions, and we'll time them, and we'll be generous on that time. So if you take all 3 minutes, that's great. If not, that's fine too. And then we will be taking questions from those that are viewing. If you want to submit those via the Q&A button on the bottom, and if we have time at the end of the session, we will ask those questions of the candidates that are with us. So with that, why don't we get going? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start. We're just gonna kind of do some sequencing. We'll start with Deb Allison Osby on the first question, and then Chris will answer that. Robert Wilcox when he joins us, and then the next question we'll have Chris go first, and that sort of thing. So we'll be rotating that way. So with that, let's start off with Deb. And why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about who you are, and take it from there.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity today, and I'd like to thank you, the membership, as well as the Chamber Board, for providing this opportunity. As John mentioned, I am Deb Allison Osby. I have lived in Oshkosh since 1997. I went to college at UW Stout and graduated with a degree in business, specializing in marketing and manufacturing engineering. I'm married with 2 daughters, Rachel and Nicole. I currently am an investment advisor at the brokerage firm Carl Hennig, Inc. I also do some divorce financial analyzing as part of my responsibilities there as an independent advisor. I, love the outdoors here in Oshkosh and on the Great Lakes. I serve on some boards and volunteer outside of my council duties with the Day-by-Day Warming Shelter, as well as Damascus Road Project, Inc.
Maybe I need to unmute myself. Chris, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sorry about John. That. Thank you also for having me, and thanks for providing this service to the community. It's greatly appreciated. My name is Chris Larson. Oshkosh is my hometown. I lived up north. I went to school in Eau Claire for a little while, and then worked in Madison for a handful of years before coming back to my hometown to do what I learned to do for a living in those couple places. I own a couple small businesses in downtown Oshkosh. I live in downtown Oshkosh. I'm proud and pleased and an advocate for my community all the time. Currently, I am vice chair of your downtown Oshkosh Business Improvement District Board of Directors. I am immediate past chair of your Convention and Visitors Bureau Board. Have been on lots and lots and lots of committees in Oshkosh, and am pretty engaged and active, and pleased to take this next step to do more.
Okay, your candidate's a few words, so we're doing fine. Chris, why don't we come back to you? So tell us, why are you running for mayor?
Sure. This is pretty singular, so you'll have to bear with me, and apologies for being short again, John, I think, but my list of criteria was pretty short. It's a little bit of a different campaign than I think people are used to hearing, in that my primary goal is to restore efficiency to council. I'm a huge proponent of the form of government we have, which is this council managerial form of government. I think that works great with a city this size. I think there are massive cost savings there. And I think it's time to get back to basics on council's job is to manage the city manager. His job is to manage the city staff. And then if we do that correctly, council can be better prepared to act on issues that are brought before them by the myriad of awesome committees we have, and from anybody in the community as well, because anybody can add anything to the agenda at any time. And then it's council's job to take that up on the behalf of the community.
Okay, Deb Allison Osby, same question. Why are you running for mayor?
I'm running for mayor. I do believe that there is value in experience, and over the course of 13 plus years, in which in April will be 10 years that I've served on council, I've served on more than 13 boards and commissions that are either city related or non-city related. Certainly gives a perspective of what's truly going on in the community, both for those that are excelling and for those that are, may have some challenges. We are definitely, we have so many great positive things in the city, but, we do have some challenges when you have, almost half, well, about 40% of your families that are on free or reduced lunch in your school district. So certainly it's a balancing act, and I couldn't agree more. I think the more efficient we are in city government, the more that we can accomplish. And certainly over the course of time, I've worked with a number of personalities, and I think that I certainly, through my leadership style, have worked collaboratively with all council members that the community has elected. So I think, with having a perspective of the various pros and cons of what's going on in Oshkosh, I do think I do bring value, as well as some history as to why some of our policies are as they are, and why some of the questions, which I'm sure will come up later, got us to where we are today in Oshkosh. I do believe in the current form of government. The candidates have been asked that in other forums. I do believe in the city manager form of government for a number of reasons. I believe that you have 7 individuals that are selecting basically your CEO of the city, and that person is educated, generally has a wealth of knowledge and experience before fulfilling that role. And then to have a collaborative and also good working relationship for the spokesman, which is really the mayoral or the mayor's job, is to be the spokesperson for the council and the biggest cheerleader for Oshkosh. And I think those are things that I certainly can bring to the table.
Okay, great. And just everyone who's tuned in, just to remind you, we will be taking questions from the studio audience right after when their comments are done. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen. Submit those questions, and we hopefully will have some. We should have some time for those. So please do that. So let's go back. I think Deb will be up next with the next question here. So why don't you outline your qualifications for your run at mayor?
Sure. I think the leadership that I've demonstrated on different various boards and commissions, I have a tremendous work ethic. I know that it's better to be a good listener. That's why you're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, is listen more, speak less. That doesn't mean not to speak at all. I certainly do everything I can to tackle issues head on. I don't use social media as a platform in which to air grievances. If there are things in which that do need to be addressed, I generally do that through email, phone conversations or things like that. And I think that's important when you have a number of stakeholders in the community that you do need to work with. Obviously, the budget, with having a background in dealing with money and finances, I understand the importance of that, and certainly apply my professional work experience to, what I can help with being in a leadership position or an elected official position within the city, just to name a few.
Okay, Chris, same question. Outline your qualifications.
Sure, they're sort of similar to Deb's. I've been on, like I said before, an awful lot of boards. With regards to my primary reasons in restoring efficiency to the process to a degree, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think every board of directors I've ever served on is exactly the same sort of model where we serve as the overseeing body for some sort of paid executive. So at current, like I said, is BID, CBB. I've been on the Wisconsin Restaurant Association Board of Directors, now the executive committee and the incoming treasurer for 12 years. And that's certainly a very similar model to this, but it's a different task in the end. So lots of experience with regards to the process that is most important to me. Secondarily, not that being a business owner is any requirement for council. In my growing up here and in years past, there have always been some business owners on council. There's sort of a deficit of that currently, which is why the slate of 4 of us running, if you've seen voteoshkosh.com, the social and web presence, those are all small business owners and very much on purpose, so that we think there is a degree of leadership and efficiency that comes with owning your own business that absolutely does translate to this style of government and to council, and which will be beneficial to move us forward.
Okay, we're flying through these questions pretty quickly, so so this could be one of the shortest forums that we ever had. So hopefully people have questions that they can submit to us. So for your final comments, we're going to ask you to each outline what your priorities are for Oshkosh, and we'll start with Chris Larson on that.
Sure, I'm going to sound like a broken record because it's efficiency at this point. But to expound on that a little bit, the importance of that to me is there are great committees currently. For example, I mean, DEI is a new one. That's an important thing. I don't think anybody would debate that being a more equitable community is a good thing. I think that in order for us to enact the things that those folks are going to do, because they are going to do them, we need to get back to the basics of council. Like I said, broken record. So there's lots of things upcoming that I think will be important. I think that I can help do that, as can the other candidates I've been involved with. And just being able to do that from a more efficient perspective and with regards to what the community brings forth and other public-private partnerships and groups like this one, that's kind of a great place to start for me. But I'm also looking forward to the Q&A, because none of that means I'm not willing to give you my opinion on things and tell you how I would act currently. My first and foremost and singular goal is that efficiency piece, however. So I'm ready to go fast, John, so we can get to the questions. And now I see them and I'm excited.
Okay. All right, Deb, same question. Outline your priorities for Oshkosh.
So one of the mandatory items that we must cover is that we are in the service industry. That's what we provide. We do not produce a product. We are in the service business, and we have to figure out with a growing community annually how to figure out how to meet the basic services of what both the constituents deserve and demand, and we have to do that within our budget each year. Each year, we start out the budget process in July, and a lot of times we do not even know what revenues are coming in from the state. They've decreased every year over the last 10 budget cycles. So first and foremost, the priority is making sure that we can meet the obligations, the expenses within the budget that we set and what's allotted. The other thing is, there's big worldly issues, and we do need to keep things and be back to the basics, which is we still have an aging infrastructure that's 50 to 90 years old. Some of that was just, was not dealt with at the time, and therefore now we've seen massive improvements, but we're nowhere where we need to be quite yet. We still have to deal with flooding issues. They're much better than they were, in prior years, but that's not done yet. We still have water and sewer issues. We try to do prioritized budgeting, which is important and a priority, but there have been times that we've had unexpected situations come up, like a collapsed sewer and water system. And so then we need to divert our attention there, and we need to do that swiftly and then be able to, refocus and redo the budget. Also, obviously, economic development is huge. We want a diverse community. We need to have opportunities that are beneficial for all in all different types of things, such as either trade or office type setting. We need to make sure that we set our expectations and we have tools in the toolbox in order to help our current businesses grow as well as bring others in. And then one of the biggest things, and we've seen that this year, was certainly, public safety. And public safety is where our community depends on both police and fire. And we certainly have an increase in services every single year. And how do we attend to that? And I will tell you, with an aging population, that is something that we are going to continually have to work on, and work with other stakeholders like our county, public-private relationships, and various things like that. And those are just some of the priorities, that we need to cover. But who would have ever thought that a pandemic during 2020 would all of a sudden, redirect everyone's focus?
Okay, great. All right, before we go on to, closing comments, as you can see, there has been a number of questions that have come in, and why don't we each allow a couple minutes to answer the questions that are posed of each of you, and we'll rotate back and forth. And so I think Deb would be would be first if we keep on with the same sequence that we had. So let's just start at the top here. Deb, why is the city budget, and I think they're talking about city expenses, growing faster than city revenues? How do you propose to rein in our expense growth?
I'm going to assume I understand what they're asking. I think part of it is, that a large part of our budget each year, because we are in the service industry, pertains to payroll, salaries, benefits, wages. And again, transportation is a great example. Back in 2011, 2012, we received a significant amount of money from the state for transportation. I believe that revenue has gone down approximately $350,000, $400,000. And the other thing as well is that, we've had some decisions that have been made in Madison that do impact local taxes. So if there's benefits that they do give to, say, big box stores, and say we cannot collect the personal property tax on there, then obviously, which was budgeted for, then that breaks down and then is passed along to our local property owners. So hopefully that answers the question that's being asked.
Chris, same question. How do we rein in expenses?
Sure. To the specificity of the question, the budget obviously can't grow faster than city revenue. If that is sort of the case currently, and it needs to be fixed. I've got a slightly different tack than Deb on this. I think there are creative solutions to budgeting and to other policies that we can implement that can generate more revenue than we are currently. I think lots of cities get stuck in sort of a status quo and don't really look outside the box. We've got lots of talented folks who can get lots of talented ideas moving. And that, again, it's going to sound really boring. Light me up in the comments about it. But going back to the efficiency of it, that's the part that could help move that forward, so we can be fluid and active on things like that as they come up. To that point, it sometimes pains me to watch council meetings these days, and no offense, Deb, of course, but efficiencies start at that level and that management level as well. We tend to waste city staff time in lots of respects. There are just things that we can do better across the board. That probably applies to lots of other committees in the city. I've been to some committee meetings that are much longer than they should be. And there are little things we can do all the time to make that better. So it's a combination of creative out of the box thinking and better efficiencies in general that I think really can help to rein in the expense growth that exists currently.
John, may I add to that?
Sure.
So I understand where you're coming from, Chris. However, when we have come with out of the box revenue generating ideas, and sometimes those do come in fees, then obviously that is perceived as a negative. And I do think staff, we've done a considerable amount of trimming. If somebody actually looks at our budget, we don't have a whole lot in for training or subscriptions or, things of that nature. And I do agree. And I do think we have done a good job. We can always do better when it comes to public-private relationships. And I have seen that. I've certainly seen that with our Parks Board, that we've had contributions from Otter Street Fishing Club and a number of others to help offset some expenses for quality of life amenities, for example. So I think to say council in general, but my experience with most council members is that we are looking for out of the box thinking. But at the end of the day, it takes majority vote. And so I can feel any way that I want and vote any way that I want, or want to see efficiency as much as I want, but I am only one individual. I have to work with 6 other individuals on the council. Thank you.
Chris, I'll give you an opportunity.
Oh, sorry, John, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that if you want.
Either way, I primarily agree. The broad stroke is, as well as I do, Deb, some things have died that probably shouldn't have died, or have taken many months when they shouldn't have taken many months. That's kind of what I'm doing here. But broad stroke, I agree entirely that you're just one of 7 votes. What I'd like to see more of, and part of why the rest of my other 3 points that exist for this whole point, are better collaboration and less divisiveness in general is something we need to do. That's why, it's no secret that there are 4 of us running collectively for the seats that are available here. And the beginning goal of those 4 working together is that efficiency piece, so that we can avoid things like that I'm only one voice in the future. That doesn't help. And that's not your fault in any means. That's not directed towards you, but I agree entirely. That's something we need to get beyond, and it starts with the individuals.
Okay. Chris, we'll stay with you. I was hoping we'd get through a program without any conversations about COVID, but the question did come up about COVID. So let's talk about that a little bit. Your thoughts on COVID mandates, those things you would support?
Sure. Mine's easy. It's been extremely public since March because my 2 businesses are directly in front of this and are impacted by it every single day, no matter what. The long and short is a little different take here. Mine's been an economic stance from the get-go. So my thinking is the more things that our businesses can do to make our general public feel better about going to them, the better. And that helps us all get back to normal as soon as possible. So the back to normal for me, and I think for probably everybody listening here, is almost entirely economic. None of us, I didn't look closely at the participant list, but I'm certainly not a doctor, so I can't weigh in publicly or to my customers on what the public health thing is. I obviously believe in science. The business that I operate primarily is founded on science. We're bound by the health department every day with health department laws. But I think the right way to put this forth, and I'm going to get you to your answer, I promise, John, is from an economic perspective. So in general, yes, I support mandates. I don't think we ever should have gotten to the point where small businesses are required to be the enforcement arm of those mandates. And I think it gets even harder when we talk about repealing mandates, because that sort of takes away the only leg your business community has to stand on with regards to doing anything that's good for their customers. So it's a tough thing. I understand why nobody else wants to enforce it. But from my perspective, looking at it from an economic perspective makes the whole thing an awful lot easier than trying to worry about whether it's political, whether it's scientific, what you believe, what you don't believe, because this is all about us doing the right thing collectively to get people back in our businesses.
Great. Deb, mandates for COVID.
Thank you. So the short answer is it has come before council, I believe twice, in regards to specifically the city of Oshkosh mandate, in which I was one of 2 votes that said no. And it's not because I don't believe that there isn't a health crisis. It's not because I'm not concerned about the citizens of Oshkosh. It's more regarding enforcements and putting an ordinance on the book that if it's not going to be enforced and doesn't mean anything, what does that mean for the other ordinances that are on our books? So we enforce one, but we don't enforce the other. I think that creates a slippery slope. A little background, 9 years ago, it came before the council when the city of Oshkosh had their own health department. And I was one of 2 votes to not want to relinquish to the county for the simple fact that we didn't know what we didn't know. I would have never at that time thought about a pandemic, but again, you never know regarding health and safety when it would behoove us to have that within our purview. It moved forward, that's fine. But now we're in a situation in which the county doesn't have a mandate. We no longer have a health department. And, I certainly and completely understand why there are some businesses that would like to have the city have a mandate in place, but there's also an equal number or more businesses that want to make the decision themselves. So it's very difficult when you have both the constituents as well as your business owners that are very divided on the issue and try to set a policy. As a leader, you make the best decision that you can. And one of the things that I will say is, when the state had a mandate earlier this spring, and the Oshkosh Police Department did try to enforce with a business. Then the rules changed the very next day. And what was the end result? The end result was that our department, along with individual staff members, were named in a lawsuit. How unfortunate is that? It ended up getting dropped, but in the meantime, cost staff time as well as taxpayer dollars to deal with. So, a mandate is just, in my opinion, not a cut and dried thing, especially when you have not consistent messaging from constituents or business owners.
Okay, great. Now I see Robert Wilcox has joined us. He must have gotten his kids off to school a little slow going this morning with the snow and the cold and things. So Robert, we appreciate you joining us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it over to you for a few minutes and just have you introduce yourself to those folks who are listening in. Tell us why you're running for mayor and outline some of your qualifications and any priorities you'd like to discuss. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Then we'll go back to the questions that we've been doing with those folks who are listening in. So Robert, if you want to unmute yourself and
Good morning. I'm a lifelong resident of Oshkosh. I've lived in the town of Nicoya, town of Oshkosh, city of Oshkosh. Went to Oshkosh North High School. Graduated from UW Oshkosh with a accounting and finance degree. So that's part of my qualifications. Ever since high school, I've been watching the council pass ordinances that I thought were unconstitutional. I also experienced in 2012 the city of Oshkosh searching my home for lead, which because one of my kids had a high lead level, and as being a landlord, I hand out the pamphlet on lead. I've read about lead, and it basically comes, kids who get high lead levels get it because their parents or whoever they're with don't clean up after themselves. And there's other ways to get that, and went to court to fight it, and I was basically told that the cops were going to come if I didn't let them in. And then when the rental inspection program came around, I thought that was unconstitutional. That was just kind of the tip. Plus, I also had time available now to do this. I also remember in the 90s when the water utility came before council to raise the rates, council never ever pushed back on their expenses. And my feeling is that if WPS, who has their rates regulated, can make it work, have a profit, why can't the water utility be the same? Also running because of all the debt Oshkosh is taken out. Kind of lost my place. What's anything else?
Tell us about your qualifications.
I was an accounting finance degree. Was an accountant for about a year or two. I worked in 401k for 10 or 12 years. I can't quite remember. Working on plans to make sure that they're compliant with government regulations. I know that's about it, I guess. Just a citizen who can, like everyone else, can read and write and have sound mind.
Great. Thank you, Robert. We'll go back to the questions that we're getting from our listeners. And Robert, what we've been doing is just rotating these, giving everybody a couple minutes to respond to those. So I'm gonna go back to Deb with a question. And this goes back to street assessments, specifically at the, a couple of weeks ago, we did a state of the community address, and our city manager was on that call. And he stated that the last 2 years, property owners that have had streets redone in front of their homes did not receive any assessment charges for those fees. So what, I know you're obviously on council, so what's your opinion on that, and why would we not have to charge for that?
So if you're talking about assessments for that would be billed in 2020, it's not that they're not billed for them. What we decided to do was to put off assessing, because knowing that we had residents who either had income loss or job loss due to COVID, as well as decline in revenues for many of our businesses. We had decided that, we would give a reprieve of this year, but it certainly is an expense. It will be billed out. The one thing we did come across, there was a couple folks that reached out to me individually and asked for help, because anytime that you try to do something good, there may be another edge to that sword. And so one of the things that came up was certainly with the housing boom was that, if it was a house that sold where there was, a special assessment that was held back in that closing, that money is being escrowed until the property owner is billed. And so we are trying to deal with that as quickly as possible. But it was positive intent is to try to help constituents or property owners here in the city. Certainly, absolutely was meant to help, certainly not to hurt.
So that was only for this past year. It didn't go back 2 years.
Not that I'm aware of. We have a unique billing cycle for that. The special assessments do not get billed like immediately upon being done. So I would have to know the specific scenario, and if there's any way that I can help, I would be more than happy to do that.
Okay, Chris, your thoughts on holding off on those assessments?
I agree with Deb. I mean, it's certainly the right idea. I understand the confusion. I'm glad for some clarification from Deb there, because I thought, like you did, John, that it went back further. It does sound like a pretty difficult thing to work through now, but the intent is fantastic. So there's no complaints from me. I think it was obviously the right thing to do, especially if we can afford to do it. We're not quite down to the question about assessments in general, right? Because I love that subject, John.
We'll get to that one. That's my favorite. You know that.
I know. We got to book this out an extra couple hours, because we're going to need the time. But yeah, as far as the foregoing them for years, fantastic idea. I'm glad council did it. So I appreciate Deb's work there.
All right. Robert, your thoughts on holding off of on special assessment fees for the year?
Well, I don't agree with special assessments, though, but the way council handled it with the current, economic crisis, I don't have an issue with it.
Okay. Question, and I'll go back to, I'm gonna start with Chris on this one. residential development going on, but most of it's high density residential, multifamily. I think there's 600 units under construction right now in the city. But the question is, what should the city do to increase the single family housing stock here in Oshkosh?
This is another one of my favorite subjects, so I appreciate the question from whomever asked. I think we're partly on the right track to, with specificity, increasing single family housing stock. I think, I presume everybody sort of knows that some of the best single family housing stock that we do not have currently is surrounding the university. So some of the bigger projects directly to the west of where I am at the restaurant are great, because that can supplant some of those single family or multifamily homes that are now 8-bedroom college rentals. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily, because we need those also, but building some things like that to get the single family stock back benefits all of us, because that obviously raises the tax roll in general, because those houses will be more valuable if they're cared for by a single family. That's housing 101. The broader discussion, and if we're just talking about retaining single family, that's the right way, in my opinion. And we've seen a lot of it, which is great. The broader discussion, I think, is about housing stock in general. And this is another long one, of course, that John, you and I have talked about at length in the past. I understand there's a housing study coming finally, which is great. Deb can confirm that, but that's a good first start, and that's something we haven't been able to do for a long time. I think anybody who's in the industry to some degree, I have some apartments and I have some commercial rents as well. I know Robert does also. I think it's pretty apparent to anybody who's in that industry in any way, shape, or form that there are a couple of big glaring holes in our housing stock market in general. It's at the very bottom and the very top. We have a lot in the middle and a lot that are priced the same, and that's not really helping anybody. So I'm very anxious to see the results of that study when we get them back, to see how we can help improve those things. That, yeah, one is return single family housing stock to single family housing stock, but secondarily will be to address a couple other things. I mean, there's not good rentals at the high end part of that market, and there's really not good transitional or low income housing currently either.
Okay, Robert, what should we do about increasing single family housing stock in Oshkosh?
When the government gets involved in stuff like this, I don't necessarily like that. What the government should be doing is creating an environment where businesses can, individual people can meet this demand. The single family, you need to have land. So when I drive around town, the only open land that I see to build houses are houses that the city have bought and torn down. And I understand why you want this to happen, so that the values go up, so you get more taxes. Well, I don't agree with assessing it at all, because it's subjective. And I have an example about that. I can talk about that later, but I'd rather see them move to a formula where you take out the assessing equation. So I guess I'm more for the free market to take care of it than city government dictating what you should do.
Hey, Deb, single family housing market.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We certainly have a great relationship with neighborhood, greater Oshkosh neighborhoods, healthy neighborhoods, and that's certainly something, that they're looking to do. It's one of the things that I wish that we had more dollars for, to tackle blight areas where we, certainly want to improve, like our neighborhoods within the city of Oshkosh. There hasn't been a tremendous amount of land to, look at single family housing. And that is one of the frustrations, because certainly we've heard that from our business community, that when they are, trying to recruit talent here, obviously it would be awesome if they lived within the city of Oshkosh, but so much of the development and newer development is going on in the outskirts. We've got some great river property. The challenge that we have with that is, all of the industrial manufacturing that was in the past, and the land contamination. And there have been ideas tossed around in that, maybe it's not like, say, per se, the individual house, but, say perhaps condos, but we hear time and time again that with the cost of remediating the soil, as well as, labor and where material costs are right now, is that they're not sure that they could get that return on investment there. Certainly, we want to continue to do that. And yes, a study hopefully will be helpful. But the single family housing stock within the city has just not been something that has been an easy issue to tackle. But certainly I value the partnerships that we have within the community that are certainly looking to, take on some properties in neighborhoods, individual households, redo them, because what it does is, high tides raise all ships, and we've seen how that's improved the neighbors around them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now we'll get to Chris's favorite topic and mine. We talked a little bit about special assessment fees, but the city's, has looked at that over the last, couple of years, went through a number of different discussions on that in terms of special assessment fees for streets, sidewalk replacements, that sort of thing. So question is, what is your position on special assessment reform? What changes can we do with special assessment policies that will work for the community? And the question specifically, why pay an extra $100 a year fee for a road replacement that will never happen? That will never happen. You'll never see it. I mean, right now we replace about 2% of our roads every year. So, if you take that, it may take 50 years to get to your particular street. So a lot of stuff packed in there. So Robert Wilcox, let's start with you and talk about that.
I don't agree with special assessments. You pay your taxes, and in my mind, when you pay your taxes, then the city should be covering the roads and the sidewalks. My understanding of why we have them is because a lot of that stuff was delayed for a long time, and so we've been spending a lot of money on infrastructure. But this is why I was looking through the budget this year to see where we're at for debt. It wasn't very clear to me. I think it's still in there, but when I looked in 2016, we were at like $150 million in debt. And at that time, it was like 27% of the city budget was spent on, debt repayments or, interest, or I can't remember how they had it exactly structured, but it was of that $72 million budget in 2016, 27 million was paid towards debt, which is like 27%. So I would like us to get a handle on our expenses and eventually trade what we're paying for debt to cover the roads. I believe there's more than enough money that you can get away from having special assessments.
Deb, same question, special assessments.
Sure. If this has been something that has been brought up a number of times, and I think if this was an easy, simple thing to solve, it would have been solved decades ago. And to Robert's point, yes, some of it was delayed investment in our infrastructure, and so all of a sudden, then it comes upon us at today's rates and not before. Certainly, I think city staff, with the direction from council and from our city manager, is to, take some of those general obligation bonds that we needed to take out, for infrastructure like streets and repairs and things like that. And when you take those general obligation bonds out, you have to wait a certain period of time before you can refinance them. Many of those that were at a higher interest rate years ago, we were able to, rebid them out at a much lower rate. When it comes to the special assessments, I mean, it is absolutely clear that it can be devastating to a household or to a business. What would be the simple answer? I would love to say, you know what, let's just borrow from it. At the end of the day, the taxpayer is going to have to pay that back. That would be the simplest solution. But if we borrowed for every year and absorbed all of that cost, we would absolutely have no ability to take any debt out to deal with any other issues within the city that are also incredibly important. Something that, kind of an out of the box idea that I've had conversations with staff. And again, it's complicated and I don't know that this is the right answer, was, is there a way that we could have a fee or a tax? And I'm not saying the transportation fee, but something that, would go along with tourism that comes in. And that is something that is done in other parts of the state, such as Bayfield County, Door County, the Lake Geneva area. Where could we capitalize and basically recoup or bring in things to offset that would be directly related to tourism? It is my understanding that in order for Oshkosh to be eligible, there's certain criteria at the state that we would have to meet. Another thing is that it sounds like if we did meet the criteria, it would have to be approved through the county, is my understanding. And then you have the discussion of, well, if it does, will the city of Oshkosh and its residents, property owners actually see that revenue, or would they want to evenly distribute it throughout the county? But, certainly I am all about ideas, fresh ideas, thinking outside of the box, and hopefully we'll come to a resolution on special assessments sooner than later.
Okay, Chris, special assessment policy.
I cannot believe you made me wait that long, John, that you know how I feel about this. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. So a couple of great points by both Robert and Deb. And I think you're both right on a couple of things there. I don't know that I'm ever going to really be able to keep this brief because I can go on all day. Yes, Robert's 1,000% correct that the right way to get through this in the end and to make this better is to remove debt. We pay an awful lot of debt, but we can't just say we want to remove the debt and get roads better and not increase the budget, because those things don't go together, right? Deb is correct also that removing bonds is a huge step forward in this, because the lending portion of this is a big portion of it. We take out loans every single year for assessments as a city, and then we pay them back as people pay back their assessments, right? It works. It's not the most efficient way, and it certainly does not help our overall bond rating, so we can do other things, which, back to the beginning of this conversation, that's what I want. I want better efficiency and to do more things. John, you hit my point to a degree. I mean, the specific question is obviously somebody who knows how I feel about this, which is awesome. Why pay an extra $100 a year for road replacement that will never happen? And John, you said it's like 50 years, right? When we were doing this at the specialist, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, I was on the special assessment committee for the city of Oshkosh that spent, I think, 7 months talking about this. So it's become a subject near and dear to my heart. To your example, John, 50 years is a perfect way to assess that, because in our running the numbers based on models like this $100 a year fee, no one came up behind. And that the average assessment, I think, is about $5,500 per year. That includes the laterals underneath and sidewalks and the streets. No one loses paying $100 per month. You come out ahead, whether it's 50 years, maybe people might die and not have to do it. But in general, that's a better method. Now, do I think we got it 1,000% right in the first place? No, and there's room for refinement there, absolutely. But this will forever be elected otherwise, as involved as I am or not. This will forever be one of my favorite subjects, and just as an example of how we can do things differently. Because if we were to do that, we immediately stop borrowing for assessments. We immediately stop paying a guy to walk around and mark sidewalks so that people can pay to replace them. And we immediately stop billing, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings per year. So Robert will get all of his wishes, which is remove debt, and Deb will get her wish on the bonding as well, just by one simple change in the way we think about it. Again, that's not to say it's right. I know there's lots of debate. I know this audience in general won't like that answer because that's how it works to a degree, but it's a great question and I appreciate being asked.
Okay, great. Well, we're running close to the end of our time here. I'm going to ask, I guess, one quick question before I flip it over to your closing comments. And if you could just try to be brief in your response here. But the question that came in here really relates to a relationship between the public and government. As you can, on all levels, state, federal, local levels, the discourse hasn't been real friendly. And so I guess the question is, how do you plan on gaining public trust or regaining public trust and cultivate a positive relationship with the public in the future? So Deb, why don't we start with you?
I guess I'm not really sure how to answer that question, John, because I guess I view obviously transparency first and foremost, always by city government. And I think there's different opinions on that. I, who have been on the council, when I look to see where we've been in the past to where we are now, I think we've come strides. And, and if you're to talk to some in the public, they will recognize that. And others will say there's none at all. I think there's perception versus reality. I always notice with candidates, there's a lot of perception. And then when they are elected and do get in, they're like, oh yeah, the information is here, but how do we get that out to the public? And how do we tell our story better? So from that standpoint, as far as, building trust, I think we continue to work on that every single day. I feel that we have good relationships with the other stakeholders in the community. I know I certainly have done my best, as well as others who have served on council, to have a good relationship with those that are a part of the school district. The school district right now is going through challenging times, and so, in addition to our nonprofits, our county, we have, other stakeholders like, Christine Ann, our Healthy Neighborhoods, Habitat for Humanity, Greater Oshkosh Economic Development Corp. And we should have good working relationships. And I would say that, if there's an entity that is feeling that there is not good communication, or that there's something that's broken within the relationship, then it's their responsibility to reach out, and then it's our responsibility to engage.
Okay, Chris, public trust.
Sure. Briefly, as far as council goes, I think a big part of that, not that there's no offense in this statement either, but I think it's important to remember that this is a nonpartisan position. Partisan politics is bad for discourse in general these days. I've seen a little bit of partisanship creep into council in the last 5 or 6 years or so, and I don't think that helps anybody. Broader stroke, I think it's a hard word to say because it sounds like it's a bad thing to say, but it's really not. I think council could use an accountability statement so that we know exactly what the roles are. So in my opinion, council is accountable to our citizens and the city manager is accountable to council. If we get those basic rules set in the first place, which again, it's not that they're not there now, but some refinement along those lines would be really helpful. I think that helps a ton also. And I'm, as people read me here and there, I'm a huge proponent of transparency in general. I like things like this a lot because I love to answer questions. If you can't tell, you can ask me anything anywhere along the line and I'll answer you no matter what, because I think that is probably the biggest role of council, is to be accountable and to be transparent with the citizens here. And that means being accessible, answering questions at all times, and really acting on their behalf. So it's a back to basics approach, and it's pretty simple stuff, but it's all in the right direction.
Okay, Robert, your comment, your thought about that.
Honesty, I would say, is the number one thing. Transparency. And I would just sum it up as this: let your yes be yes and your no be no. Yeah, some citizens may want you to do something, but it's not necessarily right. And if the council person thinks it's wrong, then you have to have that discussion and be honest and transparent.
Okay. Well, we're going to start with go to final comments, closing comments. So I'll each give you that opportunity. So Chris Larson, why don't you begin?
Sure. Thanks again, John, for having us. Thanks again for the service to the community. This is valuable stuff, and I appreciate it. I'm going to go back to the beginning here. It's 3 points for me. So efficiency in general, I think I've talked enough about that. A couple of things I like to end with when I do these things is my other objective here is to get out the vote for this election, no matter what. I think 20% or so turnout for these spring elections is not great. We can do better. You're not going to hear me ask anybody to vote for me. I'm going to ask that you vote in general for whomever is fantastic. We just need more engagement at that level, period, and end of story. So that's why voteoshkosh.com exists on social and the website. And thirdly, it's sort of along those lines for me. Getting people involved in the process by voting is really important. I'd like to see more people involved in this process in general, which is why you see the same pledge at voteoshkosh.com. Things like term limits. None of us will stay more than 2 years. And I'm not spending any money on this election, nor am I taking donations, because I expect other people to do this in the future, and I might ask anybody listening to do this in the future. So I think it's important that there not be money in this, so that anybody who's asked or who has an interest in doing it can do so. And thirdly, like we mentioned a minute ago, it's a nonpartisan thing, so you won't see any affiliation with me or any of the other candidates at that site with any political party, because we got to be able to agree with each other, not disagree on fundamental things. So that's all back to progress in general, and I appreciate your asking. Thanks again, John.
Thanks, Chris. Robert Wilcox, your closing comment.
Again, I would like to, the biggest thing I would do is defend the Constitution. I guess maybe my terminology is a little bit different than Chris. When I say attack the expenses of the city, that would be more efficiency. Also, I was looking through the budget. We budget a lot of money for overtime, so I would like to see the city hire part-time people to cover that. You could save a third of that cost. As for the mask mandate, I don't agree with that. I don't think the science is being completely followed. I read an article in the New York Times back in April that kids under 10 don't have many of the cells that the coronavirus attacks, and my own doctor confirmed that. So, and the statistics on kids transmitting to their teachers is very low. When I say defend the Constitution, I think mandate goes against the Constitution. If we start watering down the Constitution, well, then you can get totalitarianism. And so I see that happening in our national politics, and I just don't agree with that.
Okay. Deb Allison Osby, your closing comments.
Thank you. John, I'd like to thank you and the chamber for the opportunity this morning, as well as the supporters that I have that have asked me to run. Certainly, I am certainly busy and have been busy with family and business, but it's always been humbling and always a pleasure to serve the public. You know, in closing, I mean, I have been a business owner in the past in which, where now I'm an independent business owner without payroll. But businesses prior, I did have staff, and you know, that certainly is tough to go through. You know, I had staff back in the financial crisis and road construction timeframe, and so I feel for the businesses. You know, I believe that one of the things in order for Oshkosh to continue to succeed is those public-private relationships. We do need to be a business-friendly community. We also need to look at and listen to, you know, the other groups within the community that also want to have a voice. Theirs is important as well. As I mentioned, you know, I absolutely want to continue to be a good listener. I certainly want to be respondent to the public when they do have questions. I want to continue to work with the stakeholders. And, you know, at the end of the day, we want a better Oshkosh. We want a place for individuals and families and businesses to want to live, work, and play. And I think the best way that we can have a better Oshkosh is for those that, you know, have concerns about, say, government or how it's run. We have a number of boards and commissions that continually have vacancies. And so, you know, the best way to change something is to get engaged. And so, you know, certainly please apply for those boards and commissions that do help council make policy changes and to help think outside of the box. And absolutely, please get engaged, if not with government, then with our nonprofits. If not at a board level, hands-on volunteerism. We're all in it together. And, you know, again, we're competing with other communities within Wisconsin and Northeast Wisconsin. I personally think Oshkosh is the best. We've got a great foundation. We've got great resources. We've got we've got tools in the toolbox for a great community. And so I think, yes, we have challenges. Are we perfect? No, but do we have a good foundation to build off of? Absolutely. And I'd love to continue to still be a part of that.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. You know, there is the primary on the 16th, a couple Tuesdays from, actually one Tuesday next week. You know, it's good to see what's going on. I mean, we have 4 candidates vying for mayor of the city of Oshkosh. We have, I think, 8 candidates running for positions on city council. So there'll be primaries in both those areas. So you know, remember to vote on the 16th. Of the 2 winners in this, we have set a Mayoral forum on Thursday, March 25th at 8 o'clock. It'll be on WOSH, moderated by Bob Burnell, kind of the same format. So 2 of you will be hopefully joining us that day. Again, so we would like to again thank Deb Allison Osby, Chris Larson, and Robert Wilcox for joining us. It's good. Nice seeing you all. One of these days we'll see each other in person again. So that'll be even nicer. So again, with that, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you to the other candidates.